Hello and welcome to another episode of The Scramble. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Sarah Montes de Oca. Today we will discuss the March Against Terror in response to the Charlie Hebdo terrorist attacks and the response or lack thereof by the United States. Next, we will discuss the cheating in the NFL with regard to New England Patriots and Deflategate. Lastly, we will discuss the recent traffic fatalities in Las Vegas despite efforts to curb them. Before we get started, let me introduce our panel. First, we have, new to the Scramble, Elsha Harris-Yolanda, a junior and double major in English and broadcast journalism. We also have Hunter Terry, a recent UNLV graduate. Next, we have James Schaefer, a sophomore in journalism, and Kaya Berry, a major in journalism and media studies. Thank you for joining us. So, over 40 world leaders marched in solidarity to protest the Charlie Hebdo terror attacks in Paris. However, the United States sent only the United States ambassador to France to join the march. Attorney General Eric Holder was not in attendance despite being in France during that time to attend discussions on the terror attack. Should Eric Holder have attended the march? And should the United States have sent a higher profile dignitary? James, what do you think?
I find it laughable to anyone that says that we were not involved in Paris during the time of the march. Like you said, the Attorney General Eric Holder was in Paris at the time, but not a part of the march. He was there to meet with French Interior members and the French Interior Minister. He went into a meeting, a security meeting I might add, and went over topics along of determining the involvement of the AQAP and ISIS in the attacks, identified the possibility of a like attacks in the United States, communicated the need of information sharing in foreign intelligence communities, which was a big step for most countries who, like the United States, that is very big in the intelligent community, and agreed on objective criteria with respect to fundamental liberties to travelers and avoiding the harms of cross-border travel, and championed the need of a European passenger name record database to make sure that any sort of person that comes into France and has any sort of information or any sort of backing that might be some sort of flag to airports, seaports, or what else have you, launch some sort of investigation, not to harm any sort of tourist or any sort of tourist travel, but make sure they're not a threat to Paris or France as a whole. I mean, Eric Holder went in there with analyzing the problem and solved the problem. To anyone that asks me where the United States was during the march, I will starkly reply, where was the rest of the world in that security meeting? I mean, listen, if you want to have a march where everyone holds hands and sings Kumbaya, they did the right thing. Call Germany, call UK. But if you want to have a problem analyzed and solved, 10 times out of 10, you call the United States of America.
What do you think, Hunter? Do you think they did the right thing in having, been in these meetings and not really having anyone present during the march?
I think that being in the meetings was more important. I think that this whole thing is probably a little bit overblown. The march, it was cool. It was cool to see. It was inspirational. But I think that trying to solve the problems and get down to the actual politics of the situation is more important. I also think that the government here, I don't know that they had it quite classified the way that everyone else did. You see someone come in and it's a mass shooting, and it's not quite the same as a bomber or the average, I don't say average, but the terror attacks that we're used to seeing. And I think that we see mass shootings here, it's terrible to say, but on a regular basis. And I don't recall there being a big uproar that there wasn't a lot of foreign dignitaries marching after Sandy Hook. And I don't recall any of those situations being responded to in this way. I think that it's a big deal to us because the First Amendment is a big deal to us. And so it seems to us like that's something we should have cared more about. And for that reason, if Holder was in town already, could he have gone to the march? Sure, maybe 40, in hindsight.
40 leaders showed up to this march and showed their faces. They were up marching against these terrorist attacks. So the fact that the United States didn't show up, really, this is an international march, not just within France. 40 world leaders. So the fact that the U.S. did not show anyone present at that march, do you think that's not significant enough? I mean, it is important to take the back end in the meeting. However, what about being in front in the face of these marches, of the attacks? Elsha, what do you think?
I do think that it's a little bit overblown, and I didn't know that that's what he was there for. So to learn that the United States was there at the back end of a problem and really trying to solve it, people need to get out of their feelings, okay? We were there. We were doing something. Could we have sent somebody? Probably. Did it have to be somebody super, super influential? But I mean, we were there. It's not like the United States just threw up our hands and said, well, good luck. Like, we were there versus other countries who didn't even really show up to the meeting.
I think the media is distracting what the real story is. We're creating another story out of the real story, so.
Out of the deaths of those at Charlie Hebdo.
Yes.
And to go back to Sarah, what you were saying about, us not showing up at the march, I can't disagree with you more in that the United States represents an anti-terrorism movement all across the world. What other nation has seaports, forts, bases, people of all nationalities spread all up throughout the world? Embassies in every single country, excluding some other nations, except Cuba now. But we are the global frontrunner of the anti-terrorism movement. And I don't think us being present at one march really dignifies what the United States does as a whole against terrorism plots. I mean, like you said, the other countries didn't show up to Sandy Hook, and what we have to recognize is that there is two separate environments when it comes to terrorist attacks. For example, domestic terrorism. When the first shootings at Columbine happened, you didn't see other nations marching in the streets of the United States, nor did you see other nations marching in Australia when they had their first school shooting. There are different environments when it comes to foreign communities, and when it comes to France, people should show up. For example, President Netanyahu showed up because there was an anti-Semitic attack. Now, if that attack didn't happen, you wouldn't see Netanyahu, I'm guessing, at the front of that march. Maybe because he's having an election right now, but he was put out in front of it because his people were attacked.
Or go ahead, what do you
We
think? I
shouldn't
mean, it's a
care
little
so
bit different than Sandy Hook, so Nakai, what do you think?
Well, we shouldn't care so much about the visual aspect of the march and more about the actual issue. So that's what I think the story is. And we're trying to find some loophole when the U.S. could have been doing better, and we're just attacking that.
Well, the major story was the march, wasn't it? The effect, the consequence was the march, so,
I mean, maybe it's not so close to Sandy Hook. Maybe it's closer to the Fort Hood shooting. Maybe it's closer to another shooting that has more political base than just domestic attack on children. But I think that he's right. We are the face of the war on terror, to the point where we are constantly being blasted for being too aggressive as the face of the war on terror. And I find it hard to believe that anyone legitimately thinks that we just blew this off because, the terrorism thing's so passé and we don't care anymore. Yeah, we obviously care. We care too much, I think, in most people's opinions. And it's led to some questionable decisions in multiple countries. In hindsight, should Holder have gone? Sure. I mean, it might have put a nice face on it. Surely would have avoided any controversy, and he was in town. But he was there on real business that was just as legitimate, if not significantly more legitimate. And I think that should be respected as well.
I think we're too loosely using the term terrorism and terror. We're just throwing it around everywhere, even at this discussion right now. It's like, do people even realize the real definition of it? And that's why we're relating it to domestic terrorism too, because there's other issues than what the world thinks, or just because someone attacks the First Amendment issue, then we have to worry about it. But there's a lot other circumstances that are considered terrorism technically too, that we're not acknowledging. Just to interject real quick, I think that also that's a point that our government is trying to make, is to try and step back from calling everything Islamist terrorism.
Well, isn't Hebdo as much of a terrorism as it can get? I mean, it was a terrorist attack.
Was it? I mean, it was a mass shooting?
It was a shooting against free speech, as a shooting would be at any sort of magazine or newspaper or online community. But we just said Islamic attack, and I honestly, this situation has greatly educated me in Islamic militantism and Islamic extremism. During the like you said, we were losing track of the real problem at hand. And people on CNN, front runners or leader heads of the Muslim faith, were coming out front and trying to explain, this is not the Muslim faith. I think it has happened too many times that we've had to focus on Muslim leaders having to come out and say that this is not the Muslim faith. And I mean, that is a double standard that we're living here in America. I don't know if you remember in the Oslo shootings. A man went to a summer camp, killed a bunch of kids, and then blew up two federal buildings in Norway because he said that Jesus wanted him to. Not a single Christian pastor had to come out and say that is not the Christian faith, because we all know it. We are definitely putting a double standard on those of the Islamic faith, and hence so persecuting them.
It's just further creating separation between us and division.
People don't understand. You take these extremists, they're a group of people that have interpreted the Quran and interpreted what Allah has said to the extreme. That's why they're extremists. Not everyone that follows that faith is that extreme. My mom was stationed in the Middle East for years and years and years, and some of the nicest people she's met are Muslims. They practice Islam. Nicest people ever. They're not all like, shoot, let's kill Americans kind of thing. Like, you can't label an entire group of people based on the actions of a few, and that's what we're doing. Everything is, oh, it's all, like, they're all this way. You see somebody walking down the street in a turban, you automatically assume that they're a terrorist. Like, come on.
This is the last thing I want to end on, and if anything, the conclusion that I found from this situation is completely turning around my understanding of terrorism, the definition of it, Islamic extremism, and the Muslim faith. Well, one of the most amazing things that I found out that I completely been understanding incorrectly was the hijab, the headdress that women wear. I used to think it was a piece of blocking a woman's beauty, when it is a piece of promoting their intelligence and their inner beauty. And it's things like that I've grown to understand that I've greatly misunderstood.
All right, well, moving on to our next topic. In another NFL controversy known as Deflategate, the New England Patriots were found to have used deflated footballs to allegedly give them an unfair advantage in the AFC Championship against the Indianapolis Colts. A recently uncovered video shows that a locker room attendant took the footballs from the officials' locker room to another area before taking them out onto the field. Quarterback Tom Brady and coach Bill Belichick were both questioned at a press conference and denied any knowledge of the deflated balls. The owner of the New England Patriots, Robert Kraft, is demanding an apology if the investigation finds that they did not tamper with the footballs. Was the league simply performing a thorough investigation by questioning the coach and players, or has the investigation gone too far? Hunter, what do you think?
I think that when you're now caught cheating the second time in less than a decade, that you don't really have the right to be quite so indignant about it, and the benefit of the doubt isn't going to be just given to you freely. And now we have video of someone taking the balls into a covered area, and then after the half, 11 of 12 balls are deflated. And not only this, it wasn't like they just happened to test these balls at halftime. They were told, the referees were told, and it was reported that balls had been deflated before, and it turned out to be true. It seems that it's intentional. 11 out of 12 is pretty high to be an accident. There's questions of where this guy took the balls. There's a rule change back in 2006, I believe, where Tom Brady was one and Peyton Manning were two quarterbacks pushing to have either both teams or at least the home team have the right to provide the games, the game balls, as opposed to the league itself. And after that rule change, the Patriots' rate of fumbles dropped about half, and no one else in the leagues did. Now, that's not to say they've been cheating every game since then, but they learned to have the balls the way they want them. And it's not like this, like I said, it's not like this was a random test. It was reported that the other team had noticed these balls don't seem right.
Well, the referees are touching the balls too. Do you think they had an idea of what was going on, or was it not noticeable enough? Or?
I don't think referees touch the balls every day in practice, touch the balls as many times in game day, and don't know exactly what to look for. I think the other players probably do, including Tom Brady.
Elsa, what do you think?
I think, once again, the NFL has shown, and the Patriots have shown, that cheaters never prosper except for in the NFL. Like, oh, I cannot believe that we're even talking about this. I cannot believe that this is getting as much airtime as it is. It's incredible to me that, and they weren't even gonna, from what I understand, the broadcast that I watch on ESPN, they were, even if they were caught cheating, the worst they would have gotten was fine. They still would have been allowed to go to the Super Bowl. Like, come on, you're gonna get offended.
They get a fine if
slap
they
on the
were
wrist.
caught cheating. They won the Super Bowl. James, what do you think?
Unfortunately, information and the answer I have is incredibly rudimentary, and my knowledge of football in general is horrifically unsatisfying to the other average person I talk to. For example, people ask who I wanted to win the Super Bowl. I'd say, the Chicago Cubs. Go Sandy Sosa. Yeah, I know. I do think, I agree, it's an overblown controversy. The balls in question were deflated, if I understand correctly, during the first half of the game. And during the second half, that's when you had the inflated balls. So, if I understand correctly, the score was 17-7 New England.
Yes.
With the inflated balls. Then the inflated balls came into play, and then it became 45-7. I don't think that, yell at me if I'm wrong with this, but I think that's a large difference, even with inflated balls or uninflated balls. Like I said, my answer is incredibly rudimentary, and I think this is a very overblown controversy. And when people ask me about football, I yell goal. So I don't have much knowledge in this area, but I find it, just like you said, an overblown controversy.
Nakai, what do you think?
Well, I think the question at hand here is about the apology. And if there's an investigation going on, I don't think it's not business, you know, for someone to get an apology if they're wrong. And I think, like what you said, people are getting into their feelings, and it's not even about that.
Well, it's about the apology, right, and the cheating. I mean, NFL isn't the first time
The
we've seen
apology
it.
isn't necessary. I mean, they're going to go through protocol with the investigation.
I would say apology definitely isn't necessary. They've already found evidence of something weird going on and 11 balls that were deflated. So there's no reason to apologize when you already found at least some proof. Just because you can't lay exactly the proof on the coach or the quarterback doesn't mean the team didn't need to be investigated. It wasn't an issue. You are very correct. The Colts were not winning that game. The Colts were horribly outmatched. The Patriots did not need to deflate any balls. And it's silly that they did.
Right.
However, going into the game, they didn't know for sure that they were going to be that much better. And I don't think most fans, even opponents of the Patriots, would say the point of this discussion is that, man, they didn't deserve to go to the Super Bowl. They did. They're the best team from the AFC. There was no way the Colts were going to beat them. The point is that they were cheating, and they should be penalized. And to be fair, the last time they were caught cheating, they lost a draft pick. And a first-round draft pick is pretty big. A first-round draft pick gets paid millions and millions of dollars, you know, and usually starts on their team the next year. It's how you rebuild your team. And so if they are caught and they can really put a nice factual spin on this, about how it happened, and they can lay real concrete blame, they'll probably lose a draft pick, and that's pretty big.
As they should. They should get more than fined. I don't, to my knowledge, like I said, the broadcast that I watched only said that they would get fined if they were caught cheating. Losing a draft pick, now that is pretty big because I'm pretty into football, so I understand like losing a draft pick is very important. But for them, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but to want an apology for someone doing their job, like you shouldn't have been cheating. There wouldn't have been an investigation. This would have never been an issue if you wouldn't have cheated in the first place. Like the accuracy of Tom Brady, unparalleled. One of the best quarterbacks to play the game of football. I get that. He didn't need to deflate the balls. You got the talent, just go with it. Come on.
Well, from what I've seen and heard so far, I mean, it's hard to, I mean, you guys are saying that you really believe that they cheated, but how do you know for sure? I mean, I want to see, how did they do that?
Well, the balls
Why
were
is-
deflated.
Well,
so that, in a
who's
sense,
who's
it's
why is
cheating,
that?
but
Going
who
through
did
that
it?
many
We don't
hands?
know.
Physics?
Why is
Well,
it
who
going
did it?
through
We
that
don't
many
know.
hands?
So
the officials should just bring out the ball on their own, and no one else should be touching it
The officials
before
used
the
to.
game.
The officials used to until that rule changed that Tom Brady petitioned for, and now the home team gets to provide their own balls. And Tom Brady's been on record saying he likes his balls as underinflated as possible. In the NFL, you're allowed to have your ball between, I want to say 13 and a half and 14 and a half pounds. And he wants his 13 and a half no more. And apparently he might want them a little lower than that, it seems.
Well, we'll see where this investigation takes us. We're going to take a break, but we'll be right back. Stay with us.
In 1977, an 8-year-old boy picked up the game of golf from his father. The odds of that same boy then making it to the US and European Pro Golf Tours, 1 in 7 million. The odds of the Big Easy winning the US Open twice, 1 in 1.2 billion. The odds of him having a child diagnosed with autism, 1 in 88. Ernie Els encourages you to learn the signs of autism.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it. You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. God, no.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early. You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
I realized at that moment, these people really needed us. And I was going to make a difference, right here in my community.
Be there for your community at NationalGuard.com.
Oh, hey, bud. Where are you headed?
Just gonna hang out.
With Gary and Todd?
Yeah?
I've been meaning to ask you, is there any drinking going on in this crowd?
No?
If any of your buddies ever pressure you to take a drink, just tell them you promised your dad you wouldn't. I'd do anything to keep you safe.
Okay, I will.
I hope this is working.
I promise. Love you too, Dad.
They really do hear you. For tips on what to say, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Thanks for staying with us. Nikaya, go ahead. We're going to wrap up the NFL topic.
Well, I think the NFL has bigger things to worry about than this issue. I mean, their marketing team definitely has some recovering to do.
Yeah.
All right, well, moving on. Despite this, last year's Zero Fatalities campaign by the Nevada Department of Transportation to end driving fatalities, at least 5 people have died in Las Vegas since the start of this year. Some lawmakers, as well as other Southern Nevada Traffic Safety Committee, have sought to increase penalties against traffic violators. Is a public relations campaign like Zero Fatalities enough, or do we need to implement more extreme measures? Are there other approaches to help prevent these deaths and make Nevada's roads safer? So who wants to start?
So I think, of course, it's terrible if someone is involved with an accident and then just wants to leave the scene. So, of course, it's understandable for them to for us to want them to have more harsh restrictions and punishments.
Just as far as the stats, I believe last year 12 people died in January due to traffic fatalities. So 5 late in the month, it's not like we're up to even at the same pace as last year. It's terrible. And you hate to say that we're off to a good start with 5 deaths, but it's not like we're up to beating our old pace. As far as the PR campaign, I would say that I don't know if that's enough, but it certainly isn't a strong enough campaign. You see, Zero Fatalities, that's great, but I think it probably needs to be a little more like the smoking campaigns, Yeah. Anti-smoking campaigns, they're telling you how you're dying, why you're dying, you're smoking cat pee, whatever. I mean, like,
this is a shock value too.
Yeah, there's
more
some
informative.
More informative and some shock value. It's both things. Get it stuck in your head. Just saying a lot of people died. Be safe. Zero fatalities. It's a great message, but I don't know that it really hits anyone.
Well, it's on the news every day. You turn on the news and you see how many fatalities or accidents occur, even with DUIs. Elsha, what do you think?
Not a really big fan of this campaign. It's there, and that's great that it's there, but I don't feel like they're doing anything else. Like, the campaign is not really, grabbing anyone's attention. I really haven't heard anybody talking about it until we got the questions for today.
Yeah, me either.
I do think that I like that the legislative session that's about to commence, they are looking at passing bills to make it tougher the measures or whatever for the punishment towards all these driving fatalities, because I do think that is a very effective way that people learn when you hit their pockets harder or you make their time longer. Do I think it's going to bring it all the way down to 0? No. As sad as it's going to say, some people just don't care and it's going to happen. But I mean, 5, 12.
What do you think a better campaign might be, or a better idea?
Honestly, if we look at this month of January and when most of the car accidents were because of, we've had rain for the past week and a half, and most drivers, if you've lived here long enough, know that as soon as the rain hits the road, everyone forgets how to drive. So, that being said, we have to look at what our tires are made of and what tires most cars here in Nevada have. Not a lot of them are weatherproof. They're not weather tires. And that's A, because mostly not many cars have to deal with the weather. B, weather tires are expensive. And C, a lot of the drivers are not well educated on how frequent car accidents happen when it comes to rain, hail, sleet, or snow. Other than when the local news comes on and says, don't leave your house unless it's an emergency because you can't see 5 feet in front of you because of the fog that early in the morning.
So a better campaign might be?
Better campaign would be focusing on, the campaign should go towards funding weather tires being at some sort of cheaper price, figuring out if we can somehow get information provided that, hey, it's going to be the rainy season's coming up, the monsoon season coming up. Prepare your car, prepare your tires. Make sure you have the equipment in your car to get out of that sort of circumstance.
Well, not just tires, but the drinking and driving. The
well,
DUI,
and I'm glad you brought that up, because I was looking at some of the statistics, and one of the most chronically underreported accidents are that of bicyclists and pedestrians.
Exactly.
And a lot of those penalties are not as high for bicyclists as they are for the drivers. Now, I think we can agree that if you're hit with a car and you're on a bicycle, the car is going to be fine and you're going to be in a lot of pain. But nonetheless, that penalty should be on the bicyclist if it is him at fault. And a lot of the time, they aren't penalized as much as the drivers.
Well, the pedestrians, they have the right of way, so they think they can just cross. I mean, even here in UNLV, crossing the street. Nakai, what do you think?
I think there's some simple things they could do starting off. I mean, you take that driving course when you're in school, in high school, so they should be teaching the protocol for if you get in an accident or if you see an accident, this is what you should do. And so they should be educated about that first. I mean, everyone's driving. We see all this advertisement on the billboards everywhere, but I haven't haven't seen anything about the campaign. And yeah, I think those are the, social media, of course. I mean, everyone's always on social media. We should be seeing interactive designs and stuff.
Stricter laws, do you think those should be implemented as well, or?
Yes, I think so. I'm usually not for that, but in this case, yeah.
I also think that to go along with what he was saying about like the tires and stuff, the quality of the roads in Las Vegas, especially on Maryland, are awful. I know a lot of like pedestrian accidents are in poorly lit areas sometimes. Granted, they're not all in poorly lit areas, but I think the legislators should also look at improving the quality of the roads and putting more signage up and putting more crosswalks with brighter lights, and not just kind of like, I think that's something they should also focus on, not just this campaign.
So something that at least I'm going to end on is that with Zero Fatality campaign, it's a very high goal to have. Perfection is unattainable with that, but if we don't try, people will die. And when it comes to that kind of circumstance, like you said, younger education for drivers. I looked at a DMZ statistic, 49% of most car accidents in 2010 were between the ages of 34 and 56. So if you want to look at who should be taking those driving tests, it should be for those renewal licenses, not for those teenagers.
Well, we'll see what type of laws Nevada can implement and hopefully have the road safer for us all. That's all the time we have for today. Share your opinions and any ideas or topics that you would like us to scramble at thescramble.unlv@gmail.com. You can also catch full episodes of The Scramble at UNLV-TV. For all of us here at The Scramble, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.